Hi, in today's video we are going to be looking at 5 things that I won't miss about Japan. Now in the previous video I waxed lyrical about what an amazing country Japan is, and if you haven't watched that video, please watch it before you watch this one, because the things that I talk about here are minor annoyances compared with the amazing things that I talked about in the previous video. Okay, so let's have a look at the 5 things. First of all, we've got the bureaucracy. I mentioned in a previous video that Japanese people have never met a rule that they didn't like, and there is certainly policies and procedures for absolutely everything. There is very little flexibility, there is very little opportunity to or at least supposedly opportunity to bend or break the rules. The rules are there, they are set, and people will stick steadfastly to them. In a way, dealing with Japanese bureaucracy is like dealing with a nation of jobsworths. Now, the perfect example of this was when I went to the bank in order to send some money from Japan back to the UK. A simple enough procedure. However, I was in there maybe 40 minutes and still didn't manage to get it done, because the amount of forms, the amount of documentation they needed to complete such a simple process of wiring money from one country to another was ridiculous. And in the end I gave up and didn't send the money home that way. I actually asked my girlfriend to bring the money back with her so that it would work out that I could send the money. Rather than deal with the Japanese bureaucracy. So if you're going to work in Japan, please be ready for that. Please be ready for 3 rules where 1 piece of advice would probably suffice. The second appears on both lists: 5 things I love about Japan and 5 things I won't miss, and that is the transport. Now, generally, Japanese people are very polite. You can tell that from simply from the bow. They have numerous different types of bows depending on the level of respect that they want to confer. Your students will be super respectful. When you're in class, you will have almost no discipline problems. When you deal with Japanese people, I talked about in the bank, they were ludicrously polite. They even gave me a gift to apologize for my inconvenience. However, when you're on the public transport, those things completely go out of the window. Something that shocked me from day one was that when you get on to a train, there seems to be no maximum capacity. You are on a train that you believe is full, the doors open, and 5 people will push elbow back in to get on to the train. And this is something that, as a British person, I really found difficult, because if we need to move someone, if we need to get past someone, we will say, excuse me, sorry. You might gently lever them out of the way. In Japan, it's elbows, it's pushing, they really have no problem with that. Now, this links into something that I was going to put on my list, and I thought I would couple here, and that is the number of people. Now, please take the next statement as a judgment of humanity, not just as a judgment of Japanese people. But in The Matrix, Hugo Weaving's character likens people to a virus. That it goes into a particular place and it eats up all the natural resources. And once all the natural resources have been expunged, it moves on to the next one. Being on the Tokyo train system demonstrates that perfectly. There are far too many people in Tokyo for it to ever be a comfortable and nice place to live. Being on the trains, in the train stations every day was a really sad indication of the overpopulation. And at the moment, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, there is a crisis of the birth rate in Japan is plummeting. Now, 2 things about that. Firstly, I didn't see it. I saw lots of children while I was there. But secondly, this very well could be nature attempting to regain some control, if that's the kind of thing that you believe in. Because if Tokyo were to almost miss a generation, it might not necessarily be a bad thing. I asked my students about it, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I asked my students about it, and they said it's because the younger generation need to help to look after the grandparents. The grandparents are living longer, the life expectancy is going up, so the young people can't afford to have children. Whatever the reason for it, I think a plummeting birth rate in Japan might not necessarily be a bad thing, if spending time on the trains is anything to go by. Number 3 would be the weather. A British person complaining about the weather. Who'd have thunk it? The weather at the time that I was there was really unpleasant. Now, I'd been told that there would be 2 up to 4 weeks of rainy season. Okay, I can cope with that. What I ended up with was probably 7 or 8 weeks of the rainy season. Now, rain, I'm from Manchester, I'm used to rain. Rain's not a problem. But rain and heat are really, really uncomfortable as a pair. And in Japan, around this time, it's like walking around with a blanket on your head. When there is cloud cover, when it's overcast, it's like having a blanket on your head. And it's also raining, so you can't put a jacket on to protect you from the rain. And it was just generally very, very muggy, humid, and uncomfortable. So I would say that if you're going to go to Japan, avoid going the same time as I did, sort of May to July, because once the sun comes out, once the cloud cover breaks, yes, it's hot, yes, it's humid, but it's more comfortable. And I would say either go August time or perhaps March, April time if you want to get a nicer, more comfortable and yet still warm experience in Japan. The next one is linked to this one. And that is the lack of social intelligence. I mentioned already about the bureaucracy, the policies, the procedures. That's fine. But what it's led to is people who have a real inability to think outside the box. And it's led to, if there is no procedure for it, them doing some things that demonstrate a lack of social intelligence. That makes interactions between foreigners and Japanese sometimes very difficult. Let me give you an example of this. I followed a Japanese teacher into a classroom. So he had it, let's say, period 3, and I had it period 4. There was maybe a 10-minute changeover, possibly not even that. And in which time he had to pack up his class and leave with his students, and I had to go in with my students, set up the board, and get ready to teach. So it would generally consist of me knocking on the door, opening, hi, and then beginning to write on the board, get my aims and things ready. He was upset that I wasn't speaking to him. Now, bear in mind that there is that time constraint, coupled with the fact that I didn't understand that he spoke English, led me to not believe there was a problem. But he was upset about this. Now, in my opinion, a socially intelligent person would simply begin a conversation the next time you see that person. So if he'd come to me and said, hi, my name is, how are you today? Then I would have known that he spoke English, and I would have spoken to him whilst setting up my board. That's not what happened. He complained to my program coordinator, who then had to pass a message on to me that this teacher was not happy because I wasn't interacting with him. Now, process that for a moment and think about how you would respond, because my response was one of complete amazement. And yet, in this situation, there was no rule, there was no policy for him to follow. So he did what he followed the closest policy, which is if you have a complaint about one of the Westgate teachers, complain to this person. So that's what he did, demonstrating a massive lack of social intelligence. What, in my opinion, Japan needs, it needs to have its students, its young people, learning to problem solve, learning to think on their feet. Because one of the frustrating things about teaching there, you'll find it if you go, is that your students expect there to be a right and wrong answer for everything. The final one, a little controversial. And remember, it's 5 things I won't miss. So I am in no way, criticizing the Japanese language. I'm just saying that for a foreign person, the language is so difficult. When I lived in Korea, I taught myself the Korean script, the Hangul script, on the subway. So you would see the Korean letters, and then underneath you'd have the English letters, and you could kind of work out between the two which letters corresponded with which Korean characters. And in the end, I could read it. I might not have spoken the language very well, but I could read it. And that certainly helped with things like menus and that kind of thing. The Japanese script is incredibly difficult. And it's because they have 3 different sets of characters. So, this is something that I think a lot of people won't know. I certainly didn't. But they have katakana, they have hiragana, and they have kanji. 3 different sets of characters which dictate or which form different parts of words or different types of words or different sentences. Now, my knowledge is not sufficient to go into detail with these things. If it's something that interests you, it is really fascinating. I asked a student about it and he spent 5 to 10 minutes explaining it to me. So it's definitely something to read into. But what it means is that it is very difficult to read or to learn to read the Japanese script. I was only there for 3 months. Had I been staying longer, it's something that I would have looked into learning, because something like a menu, unless it has pictures, which the majority of them do, you're looking at a page of characters that you've got no idea what they are. I tried on the subway to do the same thing. I tried to learn the difference with the English and the Japanese, and I got almost nowhere. I could recognize maybe 4 or 5 characters, and bear in mind, I took the train every day. And so be prepared that the language can be a problem. However, on the plus side, they are very aware of tourism, and so, like I said, on the train and in a lot of places, they do have English. So if you're planning a trip there, either to teach or to visit, don't think that you are going to be bombarded by solely Japanese characters. It is pretty easy to get by. However, I, for one, certainly won't miss the written Japanese language. That's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been informative. I've tried to be balanced rather than emotional. I don't want this video to come across like I am attacking Japan in any way, that I am being overly critical. It's just that I also don't want to be one of those people who makes videos that make a place sound perfect. No place in the world is perfect. These are some of the issues I had. You might find them not to be issues. You might find different things that would make your own list. But these are my 5. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Bear in mind that on Friday, this Friday, which is the 2nd of August, I am going to be running my first ever webinar. And the webinar is the first in a series that discusses ways to build stronger relationships with your students, and goes through things like working with children, working with teenagers, working with different materials, and how to be creative in your lesson planning. So if you're interested in joining me for that, then please click the link, I think which will probably be above this video It might be below, I can never remember. It will be somewhere around this video. Click on that link, enter your details, and I will be speaking with you on Friday. Take care.